Hey, thanks for checking out my video. I'm Olivia, and today I'm going to talk about all the palettes I used in June. Ignore the hair situation today, it's wash day. And I also just got back in from walking my dog in the heat, so it's looking pretty rough. This is the best I could do for right now. But I am wearing this really cute yellow scrunchie, and it does match my shirt, so at least I have that going for me. But yeah, I'm excited to do this next palette roundup. It's going to be a bit of a longer one because I have 28 palettes to talk about, so strap in. But before I get into the palettes, I will just mention that I got this video idea from Kay at Makeup Lens. I'm going to link her channel in the description box. She also does these videos on a monthly basis. She does a ton of other videos too. So if you're not already following her and you're into this style of video and you're looking for another creator to watch, then I highly recommend you check her out. And yeah, without further ado, I did turn off my AC for the video so we could have silence. So let's just power through this before I start to sweat. I think I had so many palettes in June, because it was a pretty busy month for me. I feel like I had a lot going on. We had my bridal shower, we had an engagement shoot, we hosted a barbecue and had some friends over, Father's Day. It was a really busy month. And on top of that, looking back at all my notes, there were a lot of times that I was kind of mixing and matching. I was using 2 to 3 palettes for one look. So yeah, they really piled up and we have a bunch to talk about. I'm going to start with the palettes that I used just one time, and there's 15 of them. So I'm so sorry, but the first palette I have put away because I've swapped out all my makeup from like the spring into the summer. I tried to find this palette today and I could not for the life of me find it in any of my drawers or any of my secret boxes hidden in my closet. I say this in every video, but I have a massive eyeshadow palette collection, so it's really hard to organize things and keep track. So I'm just going to add a picture of the palette here. It's also one of the most boring ones I'm going to talk about today, but I used the Zoeva Aristo palette, and I actually used this palette in conjunction with 2 others to create, honestly, a pretty basic look. It was unnecessary, but I actually used this palette in conjunction with the Tartelette in Bloom and then the Juvia's Place Saharan 2. So I'll post a picture of the look that I created as well using all of the palettes. From the Zoeva Aristo palette, I ended up using the 2 blues on the bottom. And then from the Juvia's Place palette, I just went in with the dark blue shimmer. And then from the Tartelette in Bloom palette, I really just stuck to the top row. I used the 3 matte shades to kind of complete the look that you're seeing. Overall, this look was definitely on the basic side. This was absolutely something I could create with just maybe one of the palettes in my collection. I definitely didn't need all 3. But I feel like a lot of the time I sit down to do my makeup, I have a palette in mind and not necessarily a look. So I feel like once I start to put a look together with that palette, if it's not complete or if I need other things, then I will dip into other palettes. So that's kind of what happened in this situation. Again, I really didn't need all 3 to make a look like this. It just kind of happened. But yeah, this was the one use using the Zoeva Aristo palette. The Tarte and Juvia's Place palette I actually used twice during the month, so we'll talk about those later on again. The next palette that I used once in June was the Unearthly Thinking of You palette. This is a very romantic palette. Honestly, I would love to do another look with it. Clearly, I've only reached for it the one time so far, and I created this kind of warm peachy look here. To create the look you're seeing here, I used these 2 shades on the bottom, and then I used these 2 from the middle row. I thought this look was really pretty. It went with my shirt really nicely, which I always love to do. Again, I would love to create something else with this. It's just such a romantic looking palette. I'd love to pair maybe like the red and the pink or the red and the peach together. I feel like that would be really pretty. And I've only used these 2 shimmers so far, but I absolutely love the formula of Unearthly shimmers, so I'm excited to use this one again. The next palette that I used once in June is the Wicked Widow Lovesick palette. This one's definitely something I'd reach for more in like February, kind of end of winter going into spring. Not just because the theming is, you know, lovesick, kind of Valentine's Day, but the color story also kind of gives me that vibe. It's not, I don't know, I don't really think of summer when I think of this palette, but I did have a lot of fun using it. I love the look I created with this, which I'll pop up a picture here of that too. I did use this palette in conjunction with the BH Lost in Los Angeles. This one I'll also talk about later in the video because I think I used this twice too. I also enjoy how this look matched my blazer, which again, I love to do. So to create this look from the Wicked Widow palette, I had used this top shade here and then these 2 bottom ones in this column. And then I used this deeper purple here. And then from the Lost in Los Angeles, I just used the white on the inner corner just to give me a little bit of brightness. So this look was definitely nothing fancy. I think I said this a couple times in my last palette roundup video too, but a lot of the times these are just looks that I'm doing for work when I have to go into the office. So they're not usually going to be super like out there or dramatic. A lot of the times they will be neutral, or I feel like my go-to if it's not neutral is like a pinky mauve. So I've learned from doing these videos. So yeah, hopefully you don't mind. Hopefully it's not too boring, but I do try to rotate through my palettes quite a bit, and I feel like that keeps it a little interesting and fun too. Hopefully you agree. But anyway, let's move on to the next look. So here's the next look, and to create this one, I actually used the Viseart Paris Love Letter. I'm going to talk about this palette later on in the video too, because this is one that I've used a couple times, but this is the palette that I used really to create like the foundation of this look. And then the other palette I used to create this look is the Adept Cosmetics Element 115. This is the next palette that I've used once in June. I will mention the Viseart one since this is the primary palette used for this look. So from this palette, I used this shade, and then these two shades just to create the foundation. I wanted the look to be a little bit punchier and a little more special and fun for the summer. So I grabbed for this palette and I used the orange shimmer here. And this one is called Gimbal Video. And yeah, clearly I just wanted something really bright, fun, and summery. I just wanted the extra pop and sparkle. I really love the soft kind of shadow wing detail that I did. That's kind of always just a favorite go-to for me, so you will see that a couple more times throughout this video. As for the Adept palette, obviously just loved the shimmer. It was so perfect for the look. I just feel like these bright shifty blues and then these two, they're not really marbled, but they're like multicolored shades. I just feel like this is so perfect for the summer. So I'm really excited to dip into this one a little bit more. The next palette that I used once in June was the Nomad Fête de Provence palette. And I actually used this in conjunction with the Tokyo Harajuku palette, also from Nomad. So this is the look I created with those two palettes, and most of the look was using the Fête de Provence palette. So from this palette, I went in with this bright pink here. I used the whole purple column, and then I used this kind of darker charcoal shade as well. I wasn't really gravitating to any of the shimmers from here to complete the look, which is why I dipped into the Tokyo palette. I'm going to talk about this one later in the video too, because I ended up using this twice this month. But for this look that you're seeing, I just used this purple shimmer here, which I feel like is kind of funny because you can't even really tell that I used a shimmer in this look. I feel like it's very lackluster, but to be fair, this is also a very old palette from Nomad, so I don't think I really expect much more than what it gave. That being said, I still think the look was overall really pretty. I just feel like the shadows created a really soft effect, and I like how it came out. The next palette that I used once in June was the Colored Rain Botanical palette. This is what the color story looks like. Definitely on the more basic side, but I do feel like there is a good amount of variation here for a 6-pan especially. I did use this palette in conjunction with another one to create this look here. Definitely a very basic look, but to put this together, I used the shimmer here along with these two mattes. And to kind of complete the look, I used the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. This is another one that I'm going to talk about later on in the video because I also use this one twice this month. But for the look you're seeing, I just used the peach here and then limoncello just to brighten everything up a little bit. This was also a very kind of fun summery look. It was on the peachier side, which I really liked. I do love a smoky look, and I do a lot of smoky looks, so it was kind of nice to do something a little bit different, a little less smoky. It just felt very light and like low maintenance, if that makes sense. Yeah, I just thought it was very flattering. I always love using kind of brighter tones and colors for the summertime. The next palette that I used once in June is the Unearthly Spring Magic. This is one that I talked about in my May palette roundup too, and I remember saying that I was really wanting to do like a green and pink look. I was just very inspired by the color story. I wanted to play with it a little bit more. Honestly, even now I feel like there's a lot more I can do with it because the color story is so versatile, and I'm really drawn to these types of tones, especially in the spring and summer. So I'm happy to say that I did reach for it again in June, and I created the pink and green combination that I wanted to. So here's a picture of that look here. Absolutely love how this came out. I'm going to try and squeeze everything to the side here, but to create the look that you're seeing here, I used this shade, and this shade. And then from the bottom row, I used this shade and then these two pinkier shades here. I was so tempted to go into one of the green shimmers, and honestly, I still really want to because they look beautiful. But I had used Sunshine all over the lid, and I feel like it was just so dimensional. It's like a pinky yellowy shift. Let me swatch it. I think my camera's picking it up, but it's this just beautiful pinky like yellowy gold shift. It's so beautiful. So I used this shimmer all over the lid, and I just didn't want to take away from it by adding a green. And like, mind you, I'm sure it would have looked beautiful to also add the green. It probably would have been so dimensional, but I really just wanted to showcase the one shimmer because I loved how it looked. I love the whole look. It pretty much came out just how I wanted. And I'm still so inspired by this palette. I want to do more with it, but obviously my collection is massive, so I'm trying to rotate through some more things. As a spoiler, but I don't think it really matters, but I do have this pulled for my summer shop, my stash as well. So it still is in the drawers right at my vanity here, so if I'm feeling inclined, maybe I'll reach for this one again in July. The next palette that I used once in June is in Rough Shape. It's the Soph X Revolution palette. Would love to know who remembers this collab, or if you still have it, amazing. Please let me know if I'm not alone. I actually don't have a picture of the look I made with this because I used it in an upcoming video that absolutely nobody asked for, but I felt inspired. She's definitely seen some better days. She's looking a bit rough. Yeah, this is just a huge throwback. I had a lot of fun revisiting this one. It'd been honestly a couple years since I've even looked at it. It was nice to feature it in a video. I feel like this is one I could and probably should declutter in the future. If you haven't noticed, I'm just someone who has a hard time letting go of makeup. Unless it's like objectively complete garbage or like obviously expired, like it smells sort of situation, it's really hard for me to let go of things. I have managed. I do have a declutter on my channel, if you were interested. So you know that is physical proof that I can declutter, and this is one that in the future probably will be, just not right now. This came out when I was like just getting into makeup and like makeup YouTube. Soph was one of the creators that I started watching in the early days along with like Nikki tutorials. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say this is like sentimental, but it does still give me that nostalgia feeling. So it's kind of hard to let it go right now. Anyway, I used this palette once in June. Another palette that I used one time in June is the Natasha Denona Bronze palette. I also don't have a picture of the look I created with this one because it was also for a YouTube video, but that video should actually be up on my channel before you're seeing this one. So if you are curious, you could check it out. And I use this palette in conjunction with the pastel palette. And that's also the second time that I used this palette in June. The next palette that I used once in June is the Kylav Les Jardins Volume 2. This one is super fun. I had this one pulled out for my spring shop my stash. This color story is just so perfect. It's very inspiring for like all of spring going into summer. I think I had this pulled out since March or April and I still hadn't used it. So I was really excited to finally reach for it in June. Here's a picture of the look I created with this palette. I did actually pull in a second palette to finish off this look, and I'll talk about that one in a second, but I'll just show you the shades I used. So from the Les Jardins palette, I used this whole column on the top part, and then I used the two greens on the lower lash line. I thought this look was super fun, so pretty. I love the tones of these greens. They're on the brighter and warmer side. It almost feels like maybe not quite a grassy green. It's called mint, which definitely is not, it's not a mint shade. But yeah, I just love how bright they were, and I feel like they really complemented these colors as well. As I mentioned, I used Petunia as the shimmer. It was very lackluster. These shimmers are they're really not anything special, and I wanted a little more of a pop, so I reached into a second palette. And to finish off the look, I used the Beauty Bay Mini Charms palette. This is another palette that I used twice in June, but the first time I used it was to finish off this look. And I just used this iridescent shade in the top corner. It's called Infinity. This one kind of reminds me of the one from Unearthly that I swatched. It's definitely a little less shifty and impactful than the Unearthly one, but it is kind of like this pinky gold shift, and I just felt like it went really well with the look overall. And yeah, I really like how this turned out. Again, I love the green. I feel like it went with my dress really nicely, so I was really excited to wear this one. The next palette that I used once in June is the Sydney Grace Tiny Marvels palette, and this was made in collaboration with Mel Thompson several years ago. This one's definitely something I think about more in the spring, but I hadn't used it yet, so I wanted to reach for it in June, and I created this look here. This one was another pretty basic look. I just really like these kind of peachy pink tones. I thought it was really pretty for work as well. And to create that, I used these two shades here, this one, and then these two shades. Once the foundation of the look was done, I was feeling like it was missing just a little something extra. So I actually dipped back into the Beauty Bay Mini Charms palette, and I used that same shimmer shade all over the lid again, and I felt like it went really well with this look too. I'm usually pretty bad at remembering to use all shimmer palettes like this, but but I'm so happy that I did, even for a couple of looks this month. These types of palettes do tend to go pretty neglected in my collection, but they're just such a perfect way to really amplify a look, maybe add something a little extra special if you need a little more sparkle or texture. So I'm really wanting to make an effort to use more palettes like this. They are an extra step, but sometimes I feel like they're worth it. And that's also the second use I got on the Mini Charms palette for June. I would love to play with this palette some more, even though it really gives me like spring vibes with the pop of green and purple. I also feel like a bright yellow like this, or like a warm like goldeny peachy pink shade like this is also really beautiful in the summer. These classic like blue brown types of shades are also so pretty for like a summer date night. So I'd love to reach into this one again over the next couple months. The next palette that I used once in June is the Juvia's Place Saharan palette. I'm not even gonna lie, I think this look might have been the first, maybe second time I've used this palette, and I've probably owned this for like half a decade. Sounds kind of funny when you word it like that. I thought this look was fine. It definitely wasn't anything special. Honestly, I probably should have paired it with the Beauty Bay palette because it's just a little bit lackluster. I mean, the formula is obviously dated, so I can't really harp on it too much for that. I don't know, the fact that I've owned this palette for so long and I've never really been inspired to use it, like I kind of had to force myself to create a look with it this month. And again, it just really wasn't anything special. I feel like I can get this look, but better, with like probably 50 other palettes in my collection. So I don't know, I do feel like this is one that could go in the future. I don't think I need this in my collection, but I also have that mindset, like I mentioned with the Makeup Revolution palette. Sometimes it's just hard for me to get rid of things if they're not objectively horrible. And I don't think this is. It's just not, it's not great. I think for me too, one kind of gripe that I have with this palette is that they have a dark black in here. And I feel like, at least for me, I would have preferred just like a really deep, rich brown or maybe burgundy to go with some of the shades. I did use the black in the look that you're seeing on the screen, and I just feel like it was a little bit harsh for the look. I think it just would have looked a little bit nicer with like a really deep brown. That being said though, I am kind of eyeing this deep blue shimmer shade, and I feel like the black is probably a good option to pair with it. So I don't know. I should probably use the palette more than once or twice before I consider decluttering it. But this is definitely one that you might see in a future chopping block video. The next palette that I used once in June is the Blend Bunny Plastic palette. I feel like this one got shit on just a little bit when it came out, and I can understand why. Really, I think she could have fully committed to like the Mean Girls pink vibe. I don't think you needed all the neutrals, but that being said, I've only used this the one time, but I love the look I did. I'll post a picture here. I'm not gonna lie and say I don't like the selection of neutrals. I feel like the tones are really pretty. Even though I agree she could have gone a little harder with the theme, I think practically this is a really beautiful palette. So for this look, I really wanted to focus on the bright pinks. I was just kind of feeling that for the summer. So I used all these shades, and then I used this one to deepen it up. I did reach into one more companion palette just to finish up the look, and it's the Blend Bunny Forget Me Not, which has been heavily featured in the series on my channel. So I'm sorry if you're sick of seeing this. From this palette, I only reached into these two just for kind of a bright pink on the inner corner. So the majority of the look was really using the plastic palette, and again, I had a lot of fun putting it together. I feel like the shades worked really nicely, which I feel like you can really expect from Blend Bunny at this point. But yeah, honestly, I'm excited to do some more looks with it. I really want to play with this peachy shade. I feel like this blue would be a really pretty pop as well. So I don't know, I feel like this was a bit of an underdog palette. So the last two palettes that I used one time in June, I've used together for a look, and it's the ABH Soft Glam and then the ABH Spice palette. I actually use these two to create a look for my engagement shoot, which is really exciting. I don't know that I'll have like the professional pictures back in time to include in this video. If I do get them, I'll try to add a couple in here just in case you're interested in seeing my engagement photos. I do at least have like a low quality car photo that I could add just in case I don't have the other ones. I was in too much of a rush to take nice pictures at home, but I'll include the car picture here if I don't have any others. Honestly, when I first started thinking about doing my own wedding makeup, this is the palette that I had in mind. And I feel like the look I created for the engagement shoot is kind of similar in terms of at least the colors that I wanted to use for the wedding. I feel like I might have changed my mind a little bit since then. I haven't really decided what vibe I want to go for. But at least to create the look that you're seeing here, I used these two shades and then this one. I really love pairing kind of peachy shades with more burgundy shades. I feel like it's a very flattering combination, so I want to do that for this makeup look. I think I'd only used Mulberry for the wing detail, but I did deepen it up with Sienna as well. So that's what I used from the Soft Glam palette. And then from the ABH Spice palette, I just dipped into the center shade here, which is just a really pretty shimmer. Let me swatch it. You could probably see from the swatch, it's on the thicker side. I just tried to smush it out a little bit, but it's actually quite, I don't know, it's a bit of an ethereal shade in my opinion. Just this very pretty iridescent, I want to say almost light greeny gold shade into like maybe a peachy nude. I don't even know if that's correct. It's really pretty though. I really liked having that shade all over the lid. It created a really nice effect. I don't know if it's one that I would use for like the wedding day sort of vibe because it is a little bit on the thicker side. And I do feel like you could see that in the pictures a little bit too. Maybe I just didn't sheer it out enough. It's definitely something I want to play with a little bit more because I think it's really beautiful. And those were all the palettes that I used once in June. So let's talk about the palettes I used twice. Honestly, many of which I've already talked about, but the first one is the BH Lost in Los Angeles. As I mentioned before, I did use this with the Wicked Widow palette, and I just used the white shade to brighten up the inner corner. The second time I used this palette was sort of similar. It was just to finish off another look. So this was never really like the focal point of any of the looks in June. But I did use this along with the Juvia's Place Saharan 2. This palette I also used twice in June. So I'll post a picture of the look that I created with these two palettes together. This was just a very basic kind of warm tone look, just something quick and easy. It's a good go-to for the summer. To create the look you're seeing, I believe I used all three of the shimmers on the top and then the two outer mattes on the bottom row. This is a side note, but I really love this shade for an inner corner. It's just a very bright shade. It's like an iridescent, almost white to yellow. I think it's really pretty, and I feel like it's a really nice addition in this palette. And to finish off the look from the Lost in Los Angeles palette, I just used this light brown shade here. So nothing too exciting from this palette. It didn't get that much use in June, but I was happy to at least reach for it a couple times. My second use for the Saharan 2 palette was one that I mentioned earlier too, along with the Zoeva Aristo palette. And for that one, as I mentioned, I just used this deep blue shimmer here. I do think this is one of the prettier palettes from Juvia's Place. I do really like this color story. Definitely offers a lot of depth, but I also really love the selection of shimmers. It's just a very summery palette. It is one that I'd be more inclined to reach for along with other things, just because there is so much depth in here. But as you could probably tell from the video, I have no problem mixing and matching and using a couple things to put a look together. So yeah, these were the first two palettes that I used twice in June. The next palette that I used twice in June that I also mentioned earlier in the video is the Tartelette in Bloom. Like I said at the beginning, I also used this one along with that Zoeva palette and the Juvia's Place palette. I did use this one a second time on its own. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture because I was in a rush that day. But you could probably guess that I created something very basic with this. For the look that I created with just this palette, I used this column here and then just these two shades to deepen it up a little bit. So again, very basic, nothing special. I'm sorry I don't have a picture, but at least it wasn't a fun look that you're missing out on. The next palette that I used twice in June is a huge throwback. This is the Pure and Raw Beauty Christie palette. This is one of those palettes that felt very special because when it came out, I feel like the beauty community went apeshit. People broke the internet trying to get this palette. This was definitely a very successful collab, great launch for Pure and Raw Beauty Christie. So I think because of that, I had coveted this so much and I was too afraid to use it. Honestly, I think I'd used it like once or twice before this last month. And again, when did this come out? Like 2020, maybe 2021. So I was really happy to revisit it and create some looks this last month. I'll post a picture of the first look I did with this palette here. This one was definitely more of just a warm neutral look. To create this look, I used these two here, these two shades, and then this one to deepen up. I just have to say too, as a side note, this is a great way to get inspired by some older palettes, especially if they were very popular releases. But after I finished playing around with this, I actually watched a couple older tutorials with this palette. Again, I think it helped that this was such a popular release because there are a bunch of creators that had looks with this from back in the day when it came out. And I don't know how to describe like watching old tutorials with palettes like this that you still have. It's just a really fun way to get re-inspired, but also like really just kicked you right in the feels with the nostalgia as well. Angie or Angelica had a couple videos with this. I watched one from Jackie Aina. Obviously, Raw Beauty Kristi did a couple looks with it, so it was just really fun to revisit those old videos with an older palette that I still had in my collection. Let me talk about the second look, because I'm going off on a tangent. So for the second look with this palette, which I'll post a picture here as well, I did also reach into the Nomad Tokyo Harajuku palette to finish it off too. So for this look, I primarily went into the colorful side of the Raw Beauty Kristi palette. I don't think I showed you this palette. This was a double-sided palette, and it had a neutral side and this colorful side. I mean, a lot of you might already know what the palette looks like because it was, again, pretty popular, but this was the neutral side, which I guess you did see this when I was talking about the first look. I'm tired. Anyway, to create this look that you're seeing, I guess I was feeling the hot pinks in June because I also used the hot pink from this palette. I used this shimmer and then I used the white to brighten up the inner corner. And I did also dip into the brown from the neutral side just to deepen everything up and also to ground the look a little bit more. I feel like for me that's been a nice way to make bright colors like a hot pink a little bit more approachable, is to basically use just a deep brown and then blend it out with the bright color. I feel like that created a really pretty effect and I really like how this look came out. And then to finish off the look from the Nomad palette, I just used this bright pink here and then I used this yellow shimmer. This shimmer was so perfect for this look. I'm going to swatch it out for you. I'm sorry you can't get this anymore, but also it's like the formula is very old and outdated anyway. But this shimmer is so pretty. This one is very much like a pink to yellow. I'm hoping my camera will pick up the shift, but I just felt like it was the perfect shade to put in between the pink and the yellow for this look. This look was definitely my favorite of the two. I felt like it was a very fun one. Again, I was really feeling the bright pink, but I really wanted to incorporate some yellow too. I love how it turned out. I also really liked that it was kind of soft enough that I still felt like it wasn't too much for work. Some of you might disagree with me. It was a little bit colorful, but I felt comfortable wearing it to the office and I felt really pretty in it. So yeah, those were my two looks with the pure Raw Beauty Kristi palette. It was also the second look using the Nomad Tokyo palette. As I mentioned earlier in this video, I use this with the Fête de Provence as well, and then again for the look that you just saw. So both of these palettes got 2 uses in June. The next palette that I used twice in June is the ColourPop Limoncello palette. The first time I used this was actually for a video that is up on my channel now. In that video, I was just kind of trialing makeup to do for my bridal shower. My bridal shower was limoncello themed, so I felt like this was a perfect palette. As you can imagine, I used the neutrals, I used the yellow. In that video, I think I also dipped into the green. If you'd like to see the look kind of come together, I encourage you to check that one out. The second time I used this palette was the next day for my bridal shower. I ended up bailing on the green for the bridal shower. I just stuck to the neutrals and the yellows. It was a really beautiful look. I don't think I have a close-up picture of the actual makeup that I wore to my bridal shower. If I could find a picture where you can kind of see the makeup look, then I will include it here on the screen. But if I don't, then again, I encourage you to check out the video where I'm using this palette. I did create kind of a similar look both times that I used it. So yeah, this was the next one that I used twice in June. I did already talk about this next palette already. It's the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. I did kind of use this as more of a companion palette both times that I had reached for it. As I mentioned, I did use it once with the bronze palette, and that was for a video that should be up on my channel already. And then also, as I mentioned before, I had used it with the botanical palette from Color Rain. But yeah, this is what the palette looks like. This is always kind of a go-to in the summer. Also the springtime, I feel like those are kind of the 2 seasons where I'm really leaning on the pastels. This one's definitely one of my more used Natasha Denona palettes, and I'm definitely going to have this one by the Vanity here for the summer season as well. Another palette that I used twice in June that I've already talked about as well is the Beauty Bay Mini Charms. So as I mentioned in the video, this is the shade that I used both times that I reached for this. I think this is a really beautiful shadow. I loved reaching for this just to amp up a couple of my looks. I feel like this is probably one I'll reach for again more throughout the winter because a lot of the shades are more cool toned, but I do think it's a beautiful palette and I'm really happy to have it in my collection. Another palette that I used twice in June is pretty old. Very curious to know if any of you have this palette or if you're around when this brand released this palette, but it's the Nomad Orient Express. This is kind of a fun one. Honestly, it gives me more like fall wintry vibes, but something about it I was just inspired to reach for in June. So I created 2 looks with this palette and I'll post a picture of the first one here. I will admit this look is definitely a little bit more underwhelming, definitely nothing fancy, I kind of went for just the classic kind of bronzy neutral lid with a pop of blue on the lower lash line. Very similar to what I'm wearing right now, but I feel like this one's better. To create the look that you're seeing on the screen now, obviously I used the matte blue and the shimmer on the lower lash line. I used this white shade to brighten up the inner corner. I'd also use pretty much this quad of shadows here and then this one to get the bronzy look on the top part. Again, this kind of like makeup look or style is sort of a go-to of mine in the summer. I do think the look came out fine. It was pretty. I don't think this palette gave me the best execution in terms of the tones that it offers. But that being said, it also didn't really give me summer palette vibes, so maybe I can't be too hard on it for that. The second look I created with this palette, I liked a little bit more, but unfortunately I don't have a picture with that one because I was in a bit of a rush when I created that one. But it was very quick and easy. It was just a soft pink look. I used these two shades in the crease and to deepen everything up. I used the shimmer all over the lid, and then I used the white to brighten up the inner corner. This shimmer too kind of gives that like peachy, pinky gold shift a little bit. The shift is definitely not as prominent as some of the other palettes that I showed you, but I don't know, it's just a very pretty soft pink look. I felt like it was very flattering, and I like how that one came out as well. The next palette that I used twice in June, I also mentioned earlier in this video, but it's the Blend Bunny Forget Me Not. As I mentioned, I use this one with the Plastics palette just as a bit of a companion. I just mixed these two shades together to brighten up the inner corner for that one. The second time I used that palette was actually in conjunction with the Bella Beauté Bar Pastel Garden palette. This palette I'm going to talk about later in the video as well, because this is one that I used 3 times in June. But I will show you the look here that I created with these two palettes. Honestly, I think I did the same thing with the Forget Me Not palette. I'd use these two shades to brighten up the inner corner for the look. And then I used the shade Unforgettable here just for that wing detail that you're seeing. Obviously, the Pastel Garden was the main palette that I used for this look. I don't remember all the shades I used to do that look, but obviously it was a mix of the pinks and purples. I thought it was a really pretty look. This is a beautiful palette. The shimmers are stunning. Again, I really love the shadow wing detail that I added. I always feel like that's also a nice way to amp up a look. It's just a little detail. I like that you don't have to commit to a liquid liner because those are definitely less forgiving than a shadow. So as you could probably tell through many of the looks in this video, I've been loving doing that. The last palette that I used twice in June is this little guy here from Color Rain. This is the Queen Bee palette. This is just a really beautiful summery 6-pan. I love dipping into this one this time of the year. The shimmers are super impactful and really pretty. So I used this palette to create 2 different looks in June. And actually both times that I used this palette, I paired it with the Pastel Garden just for a couple extra shades to complete the look. So I'll show you the first look here. And for this one, I was really focused on the bronzier shades in the palette. This was a little bit more of like your typical warm brown look, but I feel like adding the yellow really made it so much more fun. I love how this one came out. For this look, I used this shimmer, this yellow, and I think I'd used the honeycomb shade. And then from the Bella Beauté Bar palette, I just used this pale yellow here just to kind of soften everything and again, just to complete the look. Again, I thought this was a super gorgeous look. I just love incorporating yellow into looks during the summer. I feel like it always adds a little bit of interest. You're adding a little more color, but it's not like an obvious in-your-face color. I feel like a yellow can be very easily toned down, kind of like what I did for this look here. Just blending it into a brown, for example, just really gives the look a little bit more interest. For the second look, I really wanted to play with the other shimmer in this palette, so this was kind of the star of this look. I just realized the shade is called Mind Your Business. That's adorable. I don't remember all the shades I used for this look. I think I deepened it up with the black, and I know I used Behave. Oh my god, that is so cute. This is just adorable. I don't think I ever realized the names in this palette. We have Pollen in Love, Bewitched, Unbelievable, Behave, Mind Your Business, and Honeycomb. 10 out of 10 for this palette. But anyway, I'd use the shimmer, which really has a nice green flip to it. I paired it with this matte. I deepened it up with the black shade here. I can't remember if I used the yellow, but I mean, you'll see in the picture if there's a lot of yellow in it. Let me just swatch the shimmer too. It's just like, it's almost a peachy, goldy, yellowy green. It's all the colors apparently. But I feel like in the look I did, the green really peeked through in the look. And then I kind of paired it with the same shades from the Pastel Garden palette. I used this shade and I think this one as well. I think I did those on the inner corner. I can't remember if I like blended everything out with them too, but those are the shades that I used from the Pastel Garden palette. And again, this is the second look that I used with the two of these. And that wraps up the palettes that I used twice in June. There's only two that I used 3 times throughout the month, one of which is the Pastel Garden. So you've already seen all the looks that I did with this palette. Again, I paired it with the Queen Bee palette to do 2 different looks. And then again, as I mentioned, I paired it with the Forget Me Not palette when I created a purpley look. So yeah, this is one of 2 palettes that I used 3 times in June. This is definitely one that I'm wanting to use more throughout the summer. Again, it's such a beautiful palette. I only used a couple of the purples and then some of the yellows, so I'm really wanting to dig into more of the palettes. I'd love to use some of the blues and greens, definitely some of the orangey coral shades here. Obviously, I'd love to try out more of the shimmers. I think I've only used either this one or this one. So you'll definitely see this palette again in some future palette roundup videos. Alright, so the last palette I used 3 times, and the last palette I'm going to talk about in this video is the Viseart Paris Love Letter. I did mention this palette earlier in the video. I had used this along with that palette from Adept when I created that really sparkly orange look. That was the first time I'd used it for that look. I'll post a quick picture here, even though I already talked about it. I don't have a picture of the second look I did with this palette, but honestly it was pretty much identical to that, obviously except for the Adept shimmer. So for the second look, again, I just played around with the neutral and peachy shades. It definitely wasn't quite as impactful as it would have been with the Adept palette, obviously. But I feel like this is just a really nice go-to for the spring and summer if you're wanting something quick and easy, you're not wanting like an over-the-top eyeshadow look. This is just kind of perfect for that. For the third look that I created with this palette, I wanted to do something a little bit more cool toned. I mean, it is a pretty warm toned palette, but I feel like some of the mattes are on the neutral side and I really want to dig into this shimmer. I don't think I'd used this shimmer before this look here. So to create this look that you're seeing, I used this shade, and this one to deepen up. I used this matte as well. And then I used these 2 shades on the bottom, and then as I mentioned, the shimmer was kind of all over the lid. This look was pretty basic, definitely not one of the more fun ones that I've done throughout June, but I thought it was really pretty. I feel like Viseart shadows definitely aren't something you want to reach for if you want something very exciting, but if you want something quick and you know it's going to look flattering, I feel like these are a good go-to. So yeah, the Paris Love Letter is the last palette that got 3 uses, and it's going to be the last palette of the video. As usual, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I'd love to know if you have any of these palettes still, especially some of the older ones. And I'd love to hear which palettes you've been reaching for the most so far this summer. But yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for my video today. Thank you so much for spending your time watching it. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!